All right, you degenerates, strap in, because today we're diving headfirst into the Russo-Ukrainian war.
Oh boy.
We're talking about the kind of shit that makes your brain itch.
Makes you want to scratch your head and say, what the fuck is going on over there?
Exactly. And before you bail, thinking this is some boring history lesson, let me tell you.
Uh-oh.
This shit is a goddamn circus of fuckery.
I don't know if I can handle another deep dive.
Oh, you can handle it.
All right, let's do it.
To help us sift through this mountain of bullshit, we've got our resident brain trust who can actually make sense of this clusterfuck. Ready to unpack this shitstorm?
I've been ready.
I like it, all right.
Let's go.
So we're cracking open Wikipedia, the holy grail of questionable knowledge,
Oh, the Iron
and
Way.
looking at the Russo-Ukrainian war page.
The dumpster fire of information.
I know Wikipedia.
Should we be trusting this?
That's the best part we don't know.
All right, I'm into it.
Trust me, there's some bad shit, crazy shit buried in the digital dumpster fire.
That's about right for this topic.
Let's cut the crap and start with the basics. Ukraine and Russia, supposed BFFs, after the Soviet Union went belly upright,
Best friends forever until they weren't.
then bam, war. Seriously, what the actual fuck happened?
Well, it's a long and twisted tale, you see. After the Soviet Union collapsed, Ukraine found itself holding a shit ton of nuclear weapons.
Big yikes.
They decided to give them up in exchange for security guarantees from Russia, the UK, and the US.
It's like giving up your gun to join a knife fight.
This agreement, known as the Budapest Memorandum, was supposed to ensure Ukraine's territorial integrity.
Ah, the old paper shield.
Exactly.
So they traded nukes for a piece of paper. Sounds like a fucking bargain.
Yeah, well, the problem is that Russia, as we'll see, has a history of treating international agreements like toilet paper.
Shocker. Classic.
All right, so fast forward to 2013. We've got this Euromaidan thing going down.
Here we go.
Yanukovych, that dipshit in charge, decides to ditch a trade deal with the EU and suck up to Putin instead.
What a maneuver.
What a colossal fuck-up. Right, Yanukovych's decision to align with Russia instead of the EU was the spark that ignited the Euromaidan protests.
People were pissed.
They were.
I bet.
What started as demonstrations against economic hardship morphed into a full-blown revolution.
Revolution.
Aimed at ousting Yanukovych and demanding closer ties with the West.
That escalated quickly.
They did.
And the people got what they wanted.
Right. Yeah.
Yanukovych got the boot. So what did Russia do? Throw a goddamn tantrum.
Pretty much they saw the pro-Western uprising in Ukraine as a direct threat to their interests.
Oh, babies.
Russia responded by seizing Crimea, a peninsula on the Black Sea with a majority Russian population.
So they just waltzed in and took a chunk of Ukraine. Ballsy move.
It's a bold and calculated move. Crimea is strategically vital for Russia, home to their Black Sea fleet.
Okay.
They also started fueling separatist movements in eastern Ukraine, specifically in the Donbas region,
The plot thickens.
leading to a simmering conflict that would explode in 2022.
Okay, so we've got broken promises, a revolution, a land grab, and a proxy war.
A lot going on.
All before we even get to the main event, this shit is already a goddamn mess.
It is, and it gets even weirder when you consider Putin's justification for the 2022 invasion.
Oh, yeah, the whole denazification bullshit. Ukraine has a Jewish president, for fuck's sake.
Right. Putin's claim that Ukraine needs to be denazified is a blatant distortion of history. It's a propaganda tactic designed to rally support at home and demonize Ukraine in the eyes of the world.
Gaslighting on a global scale.
Exactly.
So he's basically pulling a Hitler and claiming he's the victim.
What a card.
What a fucking clown.
It's a dangerous game he's playing, using inflammatory rhetoric to justify aggression.
Speaking of dangerous games, let's talk about the Nord Stream pipeline saga. Talk about a geopolitical clusterfuck. Germany getting cozy with Russia, Ukraine getting screwed on transit fees.
It was a messy situation.
And the U.S. screaming from the sideline, what a shit show.
The Nord Stream pipeline was a major point of contention.
Yeah.
It bypassed Ukraine, depriving them of crucial revenue from transit fees,
Right.
and made Germany heavily reliant on Russian gas.
Germany got played.
Is it so?
The U.S. was like, hey, Germany, you're playing with fire, right?
Absolutely. They warned that Russia would weaponize its energy exports,
And surprise, surprise.
but Germany downplayed the risks.
Oh, Germany.
And what happened? The pipeline was sabotaged in 2022, though the culprit remains a mystery.
Shady shit.
It highlights the high stakes involved and the willingness of all players to use unconventional tactics.
So 2022 rolls around, and Putin decides to go full-blown warlord.
He snapped.
The world reacts, some with sanctions, some with military aid. What a fucking shit show.
The global response was swift, but also revealed deep divisions. The West imposed crippling sanctions on Russia.
That'll show them.
But some countries like China and India remained on the sidelines.
Interesting.
NATO was revitalized, but the risk of a wider conflict loomed large.
Yeah, suddenly everyone remembered why NATO existed in the first place. The whole defending democracy thing.
It's a wake-up call for the West, a stark reminder of the challenges posed by authoritarian regimes.
So how did this whole clusterfuck impact the people? What's the mood in Russia and Ukraine?
In Ukraine, there's been a remarkable surge in national unity.
I bet.
People are understandably pissed off, but they're also fiercely determined to defend their country.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
In Russia, it's more complicated.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, who the fuck knows what's going on in that black box of a country?
Propaganda reigns supreme, but there are signs of growing dissent.
Really?
The economic sanctions are biting, and the reality of the war is starting to sink in.
The truth always comes out eventually.
It does.
So we've got a war fueled by broken promises, historical grievances, and Putin's massive ego. What a goddamn shit show.
What a mess.
But before we dive deeper into the rabbit hole,
Oh, God.
let's hear from our sponsors.
Please, no more.
We'll be right back with more on the Russo-Ukrainian war.
This is going to be a long one. Millions displaced, cities reduced to rubble, and economies in shambles.
Yeah, this whole thing is a fucking nightmare. But here's a question that's been bugging me.
Yeah.
Could this whole shit show have been avoided? Or was it destined to happen like a bad case of the clap?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
I need answers.
Some argue the seeds of conflict were sown back in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Ah, the good old days.
Ukraine becoming independent was like a messy divorce, and Russia never really got over it.
So, like, they were still fighting over who got the dacha and the lada?
Kind of the breakup was chaotic, and Russia felt a deep sense of loss, especially over Ukraine, which they viewed as historically and culturally intertwined with Russia.
Yeah, well, getting dubbed sucks. But starting a war over it is some next-level crazy.
There's also the issue of NATO expansion.
Oh, yeah.
Russia saw it as a direct threat, an encroachment on what they considered their sphere of influence.
I get it. Nobody likes a nosy neighbor, especially one with a shitload of nukes.
Exactly. From Russia's perspective, NATO expanding eastward was like having a rival gang setting up shop on their doorstep.
Makes sense.
They felt increasingly threatened and encircled.
So Putin's basically a paranoid mob boss who can't handle anyone stepping on his turf.
Well, it's more nuanced than that. Putin's worldview is shaped by a deep sense of Russian exceptionalism
Okay.
and a desire to restore Russia to its former glory. He sees Ukraine as an integral part of that vision, a piece of the puzzle that can't be missing.
Which is total bullshit, by the way. Ukraine is its own country with its own culture, language, and history. They're not just some puppet state for Russia to jerk around.
Absolutely. But that's the narrative Putin's pushing, and it resonates with a significant portion of the Russian population.
I guess it works on some people.
They've been fed a steady diet of propaganda that paints Ukraine as a Nazi-infested state controlled by the West.
Propaganda is a hell of a drug, man.
Yeah.
It can make people believe the craziest shit.
Absolutely.
So let's cut to the chase.
Okay.
What's the end game here? Does anyone actually know what Putin is trying to achieve?
It's hard to say for sure. His goals have seemed to shift throughout the conflict.
Like a goddamn shapeshifter.
Initially, it looked like he wanted to conquer the whole country and install a puppet regime.
Classic dictator move. Right. Take what you want and rule with an iron fist.
Exactly. But after the initial invasion faltered,
Oh.
his focus seemed to narrow to securing the Donbas region and creating a land bridge to Crimea.
So he's basically downsizing his evil plan because he realized he bit off more than he could chew.
It appears that way. But the war is far from over, and the situation remains highly unpredictable.
Yeah, this whole thing is a giant clusterfuck with no clear end in sight. It's a tragedy for everyone involved, especially the innocent civilians caught in the crossfire.
The human cost of this war is staggering. Millions have been displaced, families torn apart, and countless lives lost. And the longer it drags on, the worse it will get.
So what can we do about it, besides pouring one out for the people of Ukraine and hoping for the best?
There are a few key things to consider.
Okay, I'm listening.
First, continued support for Ukraine is crucial. They need weapons, humanitarian aid, and unwavering international backing to resist Russian aggression.
No more appeasement bullshit, right? We can't let Putin think he can get away with this shit.
Exactly. Appeasement only emboldens dictators. Second, we need to maintain and even escalate the pressure on Russia. Sanctions are having an impact, but we need to keep tightening the screws.
Squeeze them till they squeal.
Targeting their oligarchs, their energy sector, and their ability to wage war.
Hit them where it hurts their vodka supply.
Well, more like their financial lifelines and their war machine.
Okay, I like it.
But the point is, we can't let up the pressure.
Right.
We need to make it clear that there will be a heavy price to pay for their aggression.
All right, so support for Ukraine and pressure on Russia. What's the third thing?
We need to start thinking about the long game. This war will have lasting consequences for Europe, for global security, and for the future of democracy.
So you're saying this is bigger than just a pissing contest between Putin and the West?
Absolutely. This war is a wake-up call. It's a reminder that freedom and democracy are fragile and they need to be defended.
Damn, that's some heavy shit.
It is.
So what does all this mean for the average person scrolling TikTok and trying to make it through the day?
It means we're living in a more dangerous and uncertain world. We can't take peace and stability for granted.
So no more burying our heads in the sand like a bunch of goddamn ostriches. We need to pay attention to what's happening in the world, even if it's depressing as fuck.
Exactly. We need to stay informed, engage in critical thinking, and demand accountability from our leaders.
Well, shit. I guess Wikipedia isn't so boring after all. It's a goddamn rabbit hole of geopolitical fuckery.
It's a reminder that the world is a complex and often brutal place.
True.
And that understanding the past is crucial to navigating the present and shaping the future.
All right, before we spiral into an existential crisis, let's continue this deep dive into the Russo-Ukrainian war and explore some potential scenarios for the future. All right, let's wrap up this deep dive into the Russo-Ukrainian war. We've covered a lot of ground.
Oh, yeah.
From broken promises.
That's a lot to keep track of.
To Nazi propaganda.
The shits keep coming.
To the potential for a new Cold War.
Fun time.
My brain is officially fried. So where the fuck do we go from here?
Where do we go?
Is there even a glimmer of hope in this shit show?
Well, there have been attempts at peace talks.
Oh, really?
But it's a slow and messy process. Both sides are entrenched, and there's a lot of bad blood. It's like trying to get two rabid dogs to share a bone.
Yeah, after all the bloodshed and bullshit, I can't imagine them sitting down for a friendly game of checkers anytime soon.
It's going to take a lot of compromise and a willingness to make concessions, which is hard to come by when you're fighting for your survival and fueled by righteous anger.
Let's say, hypothetically, that diplomacy somehow prevails. What happens then? Does Ukraine get its land back? Does Putin face justice for being a war criminal?
That's where things get really tricky. There are so many possible scenarios, and no one knows for sure what the outcome will be. It's like staring into a crystal ball filled with vodka and broken dreams.
So we're basically flying blind into a hurricane of uncertainty.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It's not ideal, but that's the reality we're facing. There are no easy answers or quick fixes.
All right, let's try to make some sense of this mess. What are some of the potential outcomes we might see?
Well, one possibility is a negotiated settlement where Russia withdraws from some occupied territories in exchange for security guarantees and recognition of its annexation of Crimea.
So basically a compromise where everyone loses something.
Kind of.
But avoids a full-blown nuclear apocalypse.
It's a pragmatic solution, but it would be a bitter pill to swallow for Ukraine having to cede territory they rightfully consider theirs.
Yeah, I bet that would go over like a fart in a church.
Yeah.
What about Putin? Would he just get away with all this shit?
It's unlikely he'll face any kind of international tribunal, especially while he's still in power. Russia would never allow it.
Why?
But the sanctions and international isolation will likely continue, and his legacy will forever be tarnished by this war.
So he gets to live out his days in his luxurious bunker while his country crumbles around him. Sounds about right.
Another possibility is a protracted stalemate where the fighting continues for years, draining both sides and further destabilizing the region.
Like a never-ending game of whack-a-mole, but with tanks and missiles instead of furry little critters.
Exactly. It would be a humanitarian catastrophe, with countless lives lost and the potential for the conflict to spill over into neighboring countries.
And then there's the worst-case scenario, right? The one where things escalate and we all end up glowing in the dark.
The risk of nuclear war is a terrifying possibility, however remote it may seem. It's the ultimate nightmare scenario, one we must do everything in our power to avoid.
Well, shit. That's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners, besides stocking up on canned goods and duct tape?
The Russo-Ukrainian war is a tragedy with far-reaching consequences. It's a reminder that the world is a dangerous and unpredictable place, and that peace and democracy are fragile things that must be constantly defended.
No more taking our freedom for granted, right? We need to wake the fuck up and pay attention to what's happening in the world.
Exactly. We need to stay informed, engage in critical thinking, and demand accountability from our leaders. And most importantly, we need to support the people of Ukraine who are fighting for their lives and for the principles of freedom and democracy that we all hold dear.
Damn, it's a powerful message. All right, folks, that's it for today's deep dive into the Russo-Ukrainian war. We've covered a lot of ground, and it's been a wild ride. Go hug your loved ones, pour yourself a stiff drink, and remember, the world is a fucked up place, but we're in this together. Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay strong. Peace out.